A narcissist wants you to believe they feel no regret that your leaving didn't affect them, that they're fine, maybe even happier without you. They want you to think you were nothing special, just one of many who came and went in their life. And they'll do everything they can to reinforce that illusion, from cold silence to indifference, to carefully crafted images of a wonderful life they showcase to the world. But don't be fooled, because when you truly walk away and don't look back, a psychological breakdown begins inside them, silent, intense, and irreversible. Here's the truth. When you leave a narcissist, you don't just take away someone who loved them. You take away the mirror they need to survive without you there to provide attention, admiration, or emotional reactions. They lose the foundation they use to define themselves. And for a narcissist, that's not just painful, it's an identity crisis. And the moment you make a firm break, every control mechanism they once built around you starts to collapse. They can no longer pull you back in with fake apologies. They can't guilt you with silence. They can't play the blame game or cast themselves as the victim. And it's precisely when you stop responding, when you stop being controlled, that they realize they've truly lost power. You won't see them fall apart right away. There won't be public tears or desperate begging. Narcissists don't explode. They crack layer by layer from the inside. It starts with denial, then comes anger, then panic. They try to replace you with someone else scrambling to rebuild their ego. But eventually, when the new supply doesn't work, when the void remains, they enter a silent crisis, and finally they're forced to confront the thing they fear most. No one believes in the false self they've created anymore. You see, the one thing a narcissist never wants you to know is this: your departure shakes them more than you realize. But because their ego won't allow them to admit it, they'll choose silence, they'll choose to perform. They'll try to rewrite the story, painting you as dramatic, difficult, unlovable. But the truth is, you were the strong one. You were the one brave enough to walk away, while they remain trapped in the same false self you once saw and pied. And that is the perfect reversal. While they once thought they had control over you, now it's you, through your silence, through your refusal to return, through your lack of need for closure, who forces them to face their worst fear. No one left to manipulate. No one left to deceive. No one left to reflect back a decayed identity. In today's video, we're diving deep into the 5 psychological stages of a narcissist's collapse. After you leave, each stage is another mask falling off another layer of ego, breaking down another step closer to the truth they've spent a lifetime avoiding. And once you understand these steps, you'll realize leaving wasn't the weakest thing you ever did. It was the denial strongest stage. 1. Denial. A narcissist doesn't process reality the way a healthy person does. When you leave, their first reaction isn't to face the pain. They don't ask, "Where did I go wrong?" They don't reflect on the consequences of their behavior. And they certainly don't sit with the loss in an honest way. Instead, they do what they do best: distort the truth. They enter the first stage of psychological collapse denial to a narcissist. The ego is always at the center in their world. No one is strong enough to leave them. No one really dares to reject them, and if it does happen, it must be temporary. So when you walk away, their initial reaction isn't grief. It's to protect the illusion. They tell themselves, this is just a phase, she will come back. They always do. I know how to pull them back in. And so they wait, but it's not a vulnerable or hopeful kind of waiting. It's a silent arrogance, a twisted sense of confidence that they're still in control. They believe you're just testing them, that you're trying to create distance to provoke a change. And they think that's fine. Let them be quiet. Sooner or later, they'll break and reach out. They always do during this denial phase. They act like everything is under control. They smile, go out, post pictures, and appear happy, but none of it is genuine joy. It's all constructed to protect the belief that they haven't really lost you. They need the world to see they're okay, but more importantly, they need themselves to believe it. But denial doesn't last forever. With each day, you don't respond, don't give in, don't find an excuse to return. It's like a small blade slicing through their self-assured mask. They start checking your social media more often. They watch every story, read every post. searching for signs that you still care. And when they find nothing, or worse, when they see you doing well, even happy, that creeping insecurity begins to slip in at this point, denial stops being a strong belief. It becomes a desperate defense. They start sending vague messages, just checking to see if you're okay, heard this song and thought of you, but those messages aren't sent from a genuine place. They're tests. They want to know if you're still vulnerable, if you still react, if you're still within their sphere of control, if you respond even just a little. They take it as a signal. I still have power. If you stay silent, they start slipping deeper into the next stage. But before that happens, they'll do everything they can to stretch this phase of denial for as long as possible. They'll tell others a very different version of the story. One where you were unstable, reactive, emotionally volatile, where they were the rational one. Abandoned without reason. These stories aren't about winning sympathy. They're about self-preservation. They need to convince themselves they weren't truly left behind. Because if they admit you walked away because of them, because of their manipulation, coldness, or lack of empathy, the entire ego structure they've built their identity on starts to crack. Denial is like an emotional anesthetic the narcissist uses to delay the truth. But every drug wears off eventually, and when you don't come back, don't respond, don't get pulled back in, that's when their emotional system begins to react like someone going through withdrawal, restless, angry, disoriented. Your silence becomes a mirror they never wanted, reflecting the one thing they've tried so hard to avoid. They've lost control, and the mirror that once gave them a sense of self, is now gone. At this point, denial no longer works. The mantras they repeat in their head start to lose their power, and when that mental defense collapses, the anger explodes. That's when they enter stage 2. Rage and panic, a place where the ego can no longer hold its shape, and the fear they've always buried finally takes rage-panic form. Stage 2, rage and panic, when denial begins to crack when you don't return. Like they expected, the narcissist can no longer pretend everything is under control. Your silence becomes deafening, and their greatest fear starts to take shape. You no longer need them. That's when their ego starts to scream. They shift from denial to rage, a fury that is both explosive and quiet, both retaliatory and rooted in a crumbling identity. This rage isn't ordinary anger. It doesn't stem from healthy hurt like it might. In a mature adult, it's a toxic blend of humiliation and power loss to them. Your silence isn't a normal part of a breakup. It's a direct challenge to the control they once had over you. And narcissists don't know how to lose power without striking back. You'll notice it clearly. The messages will come, not as pleas, but as veiled attack. I always knew you were weak. You're the type who runs when things get hard or worse. I found someone who actually deserves me. These words aren't sent to reconnect. They bait carefully chosen to provoke a reaction. Because if you respond even with one word, they'll believe they still have influence. But if you don't, that rage fur is unable to be released and builds into an inner chaos. They'll try to hide beneath new layers of performance. At this point, the narcissist often escalates tactics, provoking jealousy, confrontation, or emotional baiting. They might suddenly appear with someone new. Post affectionate photos, brag about their much better relationship, but don't be fooled. They're not in love. The new person is a tool. A weapon meant to make you feel replaceable. It's not about starting over, it's about hurting you. Their psychology during this stage is deeply conflicted. They want you to hurt, but they also want you to come back. They want you to be jealous, but if you did return, they'd instantly revive the same old power game. None of it comes from love. It all stems from a fear of abandonment and a desire for control. What makes this phase especially dangerous is the combination of rejection and delusional entitlement. They're not just angry at you, they're angry that you dared to reclaim your freedom without permission. In the narcissist's world, you don't get to quit the game unless they say so. And your act of walking away, especially if you maintain your silence, injures their ego at a primal level. Many people who've left narcissists describe this phase as walking through a silent battlefield. Everything seems quiet, but the energy is threatening. You feel watched. Friends mention the narcissist has been asking about you. You see them online at the exact moment you post something. It's as if they're waiting for you to break, but now you know this isn't love, it's a tactic. And when the tactic fails, when you don't get jealous, don't reply, don't fall into the trap, they begin to truly lose their bearings. Their mind slips into confusion. They can no longer predict you. You no longer act like the ideal supply. You're no longer someone they can manipulate with tantrums or indifference. That's when panic begins. This panic doesn't always show up in screaming or outburst. Often it's disturbingly quiet. But dangerously toxic. They might start sabotaging your reputation, spreading lies to friends, family, or colleagues. Not to vent, but to control how others perceive you. They want you discredited, diminished, because they can't handle the fact that you're thriving without them. In some cases, they'll try to re-enter your life as the repentant good guy, but don't confuse this with true remorse. That behavior, if it comes, is just another strategic loop to reclaim power when they can't hurt you. They'll try to make you pity them, and if you give in, they'll climb right back onto the control platform and the cycle begins again. You may notice something odd. During this time, the narcissist invests a lot of energy into appearing like they don't care. They work overtime to prove they're happy, unaffected, better off. But the paradox is this: people who truly don't care don't need to prove anything. The very effort they put into erasing you is the biggest clue that you're still very present in their mind. Maybe more than ever, this rage won't last forever. It only continues as long as they believe you might still react. When their attempts to provoke you fail, when you remain unshaken, when the performance no longer works, the panic gradually gives way to emotional exhaustion. And that's when they're forced to move into the next phase, seeking a replacement. But before they leave this stage of rage, remember this: the more dramatic their behavior, the more important you were. They didn't lose control because you meant nothing. They lost control because you were the first one who never came back. And for someone who feeds on power, that is a wound so deep, they can't even name. Replacement and ego reconstruction. 3-3 replacement and ego reconstruction. After the storm of rage passes, after the retaliation tactics fail, and after you still don't react the way they expected, the narcissist begins to feel their panic cooling into something far more terrifying. Emptiness, that's the moment they realize everything they threw into the void. The provocation, the cold silence, the new supply, the curated performance didn't bring you back, and so they are forced into the next stage, seeking a replacement. For most people, when a relationship ends, there's space for grieving, healing, and growth. But for narcissists, emptiness is unbearable. They don't have a stable inner self to anchor them when the world around them falls apart. So instead of healing, they plunge into the frantic rebuilding of their ego with anything that can reflect their image back to them. The first thing they do is find someone new. Quickly, no pause for reflection, no genuine connection needed. They need a new mirror, someone who will admire them, submit to them, and make them feel important again. And when they find that person, the familiar cycle begins. Love bombing. They sweep the new target into an intoxicating whirlwind of compliments, grand gestures, and promises of a different kind of love. It's all a distorted replica of what they once did with you. But there's one key difference this time. Everything is rushed and emotionally hollow. The new person isn't being loved. They're being used not as a partner, but as a tool to quiet the echo of failure the narcissist can't even name. This isn't about connection, it's about survival. Even if they pretend the new person is better than you, more compatible, easier to deal with, more mature, deep down they know something they'll never admit. The new person isn't you. They are not the one who saw the narcissist's raw, unmasked self and didn't run. They don't reflect that same depth because they haven't seen enough. And when the narcissist starts to sense that lack of true connection, they speed up the game. They begin pushing for emotional milestones, moving in engagement. Even marriage, not out of readiness, but out of desperation, to anchor someone in place to maintain the illusion of self. But it all starts to feel hollow because no one can fill the void created by inauthenticity. At this point, the narcissist enters a draining cycle comparing the new person to you. Not out loud, but in their mind, they remember conversations the new person doesn't understand. They remember how you handled their anger not with heart submission, but with grounded presence. They remember how you went silent, not as manipulation, but as protection. And they begin to realize the new person may be more compliant, but they don't make the narcissist feel special in this stage. They may overcompensate, they'll suddenly overload the new partner, flooding social media with photos, captions dripping in sentimentality, declarations like, "I found the love of my life." But don't be fooled, these gestures aren't love. They're desperate performances meant to cover up the internal void. They're trying to convince the world and themselves, "I'm fine, I've replaced them." But deep down, they know it's a lie. The truth is, they can't replace you. Not because you were perfect, but because you were real. You were the one who wasn't fooled by their mask. The one who challenged them, the one who loved them. With a kind of love they never understood, one that didn't need to control or impress. And now, no matter how many people they cycle through, no matter how loud they broadcast their new soulmate, they can't replicate that feeling. That realization stings. They hate remembering you. They're irritated by how peacefully you seem to be living. They're jealous that you no longer react to them, and in the quiet corners of their mind, they begin to realize they've truly lost you. Not physically, but emotionally, you walked away and left no door open. Now the pain isn't from losing a partner, it's from losing the best version of themselves, a version only you ever saw, and that is irreplaceable. No new lover, no luxury vacation, no flashy apartment can recreate the feeling of being truly seen, truly known, and truly loved the way you once gave. And when all attempts to reconstruct the ego fail, they fall into a silence not of peace but of exhaustion. Everything they built, the new supply, the performance, the illusion of power, can't save them from the truth. They lost the only real thing that ever entered their life. They won't say it, not out loud. Not ever, but they know they feel it every morning. They wake up next to someone they can't connect with every time they walk past a place that no longer holds meaning. Every time they lock eyes with someone and feel nothing reflected back, and every time they stare into the mirror only to find there's no one left there to remind them who they... The silent collapse are stage 4. The silent collapse, the silence you see from the narcissist at this stage, is no longer a tactic. It's no longer a mask used to provoke you or a ploy to regain power through distance. This silence comes from somewhere else, somewhere deeper, darker, and far more chaotic. A place where even they don't know who they are anymore after failing to replace you. After their new relationships fail to produce genuine emotion, and after their performances start losing their audience, the narcissist enters the one territory they fear most. The void. This isn't a peaceful pause for self-reflection. This is the terrain where those without a real self begin to disintegrate. No one is there to reflect their specialness. No one left to influence, manipulate, or blame. All tools of control have fallen away, and now they are forced to face the one thing they've spent a lifetime running from themselves. Without polish, without script, without spectators, just a hollow soul drifting in the dark on the outside. They may still smile, still go to work, still post happy photos, but if you look closely, you'll see something in their eyes has dimmed. Something has gone out because by now they've run out of emotional supply. They begin to feel a fatigue. They can't name a disconnection. No one can reach a loneliness of their own. Making the danger is this: narcissists lack the internal tools to survive this unraveling. They don't know how to self-soothe. They don't know how to feel, let alone process grief. They don't have the emotional skill set of someone who has matured inwardly, and so they begin to self-destruct in silence. Some will dive into work over work to avoid feeling. Others will spiral into addiction, partying, or casual sex. Anything intense enough to numb the emotional pain, but The more they chase distractions, the further they drift from themselves. And the further they drift, the deeper the collapse at this stage. Many narcissists begin to feel a new kind of pain. Not from you, but from within themselves. They begin to miss you, but not because they loved you. They miss the feeling of being seen by you, heard by you, balanced by you in ways they never understood with you. Gone, they've lost both their anchor and their mirror, and the emptiness they feel has no name because they've never learned the language of truth. And when they can't name a feeling, they begin to convert it into a kind of hidden depression. No one sees them cry, but they begin to disengage from life. They lose interest, they lose energy, they lose the aliveness they once faked. Some begin to experience depersonalization, a psychological phenomenon, where they feel like they're watching life through a fogged-up window. Detached from any real emotion in quiet moments, they may scroll through old messages, play songs you once loved, look at photos you once took not to long for the relationship, but to find themselves in your eyes. But what they see is someone they no longer recognize because you once saw the human in them, and now even they cannot. This is when you may see them vanish from social media, or the opposite, become excessively loud and performative. Both are signs of collapse. One is full retreat, the other a desperate attempt to rebuild a new persona. But regardless of how it looks, the truth underneath is the same. They are unraveling. Worse still, they begin to resent the world. No one is good enough. Love is fake. People are untrustworthy. But what they can't articulate is the truth. They don't know how to feel truth because they've never lived it. Some may grasp at extreme belief systems or dive into another test-or-run relationship. But you and I both know, unless they stop and look inward, all of those loops are just delays stalling a full-scale breakdown. You no longer need to do anything at this point. You don't need to check in. You don't need to come back to rescue them because you've already done that more than once and they refused. Now, the only thing you must do is hold your dignified silence and let them face the darkness they once denied. If you ever doubted the importance of your departure, know this. Your silence has triggered the collapse of a toxic belief system. You don't need to hate them. You don't need to forgive them right now. Just keep living as the person they were never strong enough to hold. Not because you didn't love enough, but because you chose truth. This stage comes without drama. No screaming, no pleading. Just silence, but the kind of silence that signals something. Breaking from the inside, a silence they don't understand, but you do. Because you lived with truth and you truly walked. The reconstruction away. Stage 5, reconstructing the self, or complete collapse after everything. The denial, the rage, the failed replacements, and the quiet, hollow months, the narcissist arrives at the final crossroads. And here there's no one left to blame, no mirror to reflect them back, no new supply to distract them. They stand in a nameless void face to face with what they've avoided their entire lives themselves. And at this point, there are only two paths. One leads to awakening, to dismantling the false self completely, to learning how to live authentically. Love honestly and feel deeply. The other path, far more common, is total collapse, sinking into a cycle of desperate repetition, drifting through life like a ghost, endlessly craving validation. They never learned how to maintain each, begin with the rare path awakening. Not every narcissist is incapable of change. Some, especially those who have truly hit rock bottom, having lost everything they used to define themselves, may begin to look inward with a rare kind of honesty. They may experience what's known as an ego death, a moment when the mask shatters, when they see the buried wounds beneath their defenses, when they finally whisper for the first time, "I don't know who I am anymore." This kind of awakening isn't loud. It arrives in deep silence, in a fracture at the core. And if they're courageous enough, humble enough, they'll seek therapy, meditation, or guidance from people they once dismissed. They begin to learn how to take responsibility, not to manipulate, but to truly own their actions. They begin to relearn love, not to control, but to give. And they accept that who they once were has to die in order for a real self to be reborn. But this path is rare, very rare, because it demands that the narcissist go completely against the grain of their lifelong defense mechanisms. It requires admitting they were wrong, not because they failed, but because they were never taught how to be real. Most cannot do this. They lack the strength, the courage, or the guidance, so they choose the other path. Repetition collapse, and life is an empty shell. In this more common scenario, the narcissist starts the cycle all over again, but with less energy, less passion, and far more desperation. They find a new person. They perform. They love bomb. They control. But there's no fire, no soul, because now they don't even believe in themselves, and they certainly don't believe in others. They're not driven by strategy anymore, but by habit. And over time, even manipulation loses its thrill. In these stages, they may become what psychologists call covert social narcissists, saying all the right things, appearing moral, speaking in kind and polished tones, but inside they are emotionally barren. They don't hurt, but they don't live. Either they exist like a replica of who they once pretended to be with a hollow core that nothing can fill. Some narcissists become even more dangerous during this stage because they feel they have nothing left to lose. They may become colder, crueler, more detached. They manipulate not out of desire for connection, but because it's the only thing that makes them feel like they're doing something. And they continue to hurt others not for pleasure, but because the pain within them has no other outlet for those who once loved a narcissist. Especially superempaths. This is the time you must accept a painful truth. You cannot save them, and you are not responsible for doing so. You gave chances, you showed compassion, you held on to hope. But healing cannot be outsourced. It has to begin within. And if they're not willing to look at the truth, then anything you do will only help them delay the inevitable confrontation if they collapse entirely. It is not your fault if they fall into a spiral with no escape. It is the consequence of a long chain of truth rejections. Truths that you once tried to bring in the most loving way possible. And maybe there will come a quiet moment when they think of you not with rage, not with the desire to hurt you, but in silence as they look around and realize the only person who ever truly saw them, who ever loved them without condition, was also the only one brave enough to walk away for the sake of truth. That is the legacy you leave behind. Not destruction, but a mark of truth. The truth that you did love. And when that love was not honored, you were strong enough to walk away. The legacy, you may have once asked yourself, do they feel pain? Do they have regrets? Do they ever think of me behind that perfect performance? And you tormented yourself because there was no apology, no acknowledgement, no gesture that made you feel, even for a second, that the love once shared meant something. But today you no longer need those words because through each stage, you've seen the truth. They are not okay, not even close. There is no peace in silence built on fear. No smile is real when it's masking a growing void inside. They may never admit it, but that doesn't change the reality. They've been unraveling piece by piece since the day you walked away. And while they remain trapped in their cycle of self-destruction and manipulation, you, the one they called too sensitive, too emotional, too forgiving, you are the one who walked out not out of hatred, but out of awakening. You saw everything they didn't want you to see, and you had the courage to say enough, and that wasn't weakness. That was strength, the strength to let go without needing an explanation, the strength to heal without needing validation, the strength to be real when others only knew how to perform. And if there's one thing you take from this video, let it not be satisfaction in their collapse, but quiet pride in knowing this. Your departure was not an ending. It was the birth of your truest self. You are no longer someone who needs others to confirm your worth. You are no longer waiting for an apology just to feel at peace. You don't need to see them fall apart to know you were right. You need only one thing to keep walking forward without looking back. And if this journey has touched something within you, if you've ever been manipulated, caught in the cycle of a toxic relationship with no way out, remember this: you are not alone. There are millions learning to rise again, to love themselves, to live, without needing anyone else to see them in order to validate their truth. So if you're here quietly, walking bravely, still feeling a little tender inside, then let me say this to you from the deepest part of my heart. You are stronger than you've ever been. Don't dim your light just because it makes others uncomfortable. Don't quiet your voice just to keep someone who was never meant to hear you. And don't look back, not even one step, because the road ahead has no room for the shadows you've already outgrown. If you see yourself in this journey, don't forget to hit subscribe so we can continue walking this path together toward freedom, awakening, and healthy love, beginning within your own heart. They may collapse, but you have risen, and this time you're never going